said you better look good when you're doing it. What's up? What's up? I'm just checking in because I was just watching everybody's reporting and coverage on what's been going on in Diddy's case on today. And of course, I'm going to go to Nancy Grace and do this live on and react to her video. I know it's late, but I ain't got nothing else to do right now. And the house is pretty quiet, so this is the best time for me to do this.
Breaking news tonight, Diddy raging over last week's Tootsie Roll reveal as a PR fail emerges. Sean Combs' PR team discovered actually paying off people outside the courthouse to wear free puffy t-shirts. Don Richard taking the stand, testifying that Sean Combs threatened we could die for speaking out and defending Cassie Ventura. This, as evidence reveals, depraved Diddy constantly carried a Louis Vuitton bag stuffed with cocaine, ecstasy, pot, horse tranquilizer, and Plan B birth control. Good evening.
So for the people in the back of the bus still not putting the dots together on how they're going to present their case as far as the trafficking they're alleging went on with Cassie and the witnesses they're putting on the stand to try to corroborate why she was feeling in fear, even though there's text messages that state otherwise. You see where this is going.
Evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
Vile, greedy abuser
that took part in heinous beatings and bizarre sex acts, decades of abuse of women and so-called freak-offs. This is a day that's been long in coming. Will there be justice?
And I say Dirty Diddy going down. This is the case.
Testimony pouring from the witness stand all day long. And joining us outside the courthouse, Lauren Conlon, investigative reporter, star of Pop Crime TV. Lauren, thank you for being with us. Tell us what's going on in the courtroom.
Yes, Nancy, it started off pretty interesting this morning with Diddy's lawyers actually arguing that the case and the witnesses is becoming more of a gossip chamber of some sort. We also saw Don Richard finish her direct testimony and get cross-examined. And what's come into question, Nancy, is all of Don Richard's previous statements to the government as they appeared to change. And we learned this when the defense came up to cross-examine her. And Don Richard actually admitted herself that her testimony has changed based on her memories. Specifically, after the skillet incident, she testified last week and today that Diddy and Harv Pierre, one of his Bad Boy Record executives, actually said to her that if she told, people go missing if they tell. And
you know what, McCain? A lot of us that watched the R. Kelly case, we said the same thing. If they're gonna rely on all of these bad act witnesses and all of these uncharged acts that they've compiled together, instead of proving with evidence what they claim, there's no need in people going back and forth. Like, it's simple things that could have put things into greater perspective as far as evidence, but instead they relied on a lot of testimony. So from what I gather off of what Don had testified today and the key points that they're presenting, as far as when they ask questions like, what did the bodyguards do? They're setting the stage to let you know that the people around Diddy, aka his enterprise of people doing his biddings, they sat back and did nothing while so-called abuse was going on. And now they're bringing in the element of people disappearing to bring that fear factor as to why people don't want to speak up.
And The defense pointed out that she had never said this to the government, and she admitted that, she didn't remember. So they are really trying to poke holes in her statement.
You mentioned a quote skillet incident, and this is Don Richard recounting when Sean Combs actually beat Cassie Ventura in the head with a frying pan. Could you explain what happened?
Yes. So Don Richard first testified on Friday that she was recording music at Diddy's LA home with her bandmate. They were in this Diddy Dirty Money group, or Dirty Money. And Cassie was making eggs at the stove. Diddy came down the stairs, and she said that he attacked her or tried to hit her with his frying pan, and that Cassie appeared to go down in a fetal position, and then he dragged her up the stairs. Now, Don Richard, during her redirect with the government, after she was called out for changing her story, she said without a doubt that she knows that Diddy hurt Cassie. She was in the fetal position, and she saw her get dragged up the stairs. Don Richard.
Now, obviously, like everybody else is saying, if this was a case of domestic violence, we could see the relevancy in what she's portraying. But what she's saying only leaves more questions to ask. Okay, well, hypothetically, if you saw this going down, and we're looking at what the government is trying to present as far as this is why Cassie was engaging in these freak offs, the next line of questions on my mind are, okay, so after this incident, did you see anything leading up to an alleged freak off? Anything that would lead to Cassie engaging in activities with other people after this quote unquote assault? Like anything that would fall into that line instead of just keep laying the foundation that everybody saw Cassie getting her ass whooped and nobody said nothing. Okay, that's one thing. But the next thing is, did anybody see after this? Now it goes into him coercing her into sexual activities. In my mind,
Shard testified that over time, her memory has gotten better because she wanted to suppress a lot of these bad memories from working with Diddy. She worked so hard to not remember them. And now, she's been working with the government to remember them.
So when they make statements like that, that don't sound like coercion to people who are skeptical about what's going on. If it takes somebody coming out saying that they've been working so hard to forget these repressed memories, but now they can come over here and work with the government, not a unbiased therapist to, help them through their trauma. No, they got to work with the government to help them move along their statements that would outline so-called abuse they're trying to build up.
We're discussing inconsistencies, that she had not used the words Diddy threatened that, or his hench person, that people disappear when they talk. What phraseology, if any, did she use when she was talking to the state?
She left that completely out, but said that Diddy said to her, "What you witnessed was passion. Cassie is okay." Carrie Morgan, Cassie's former best friend, was on the stand, and she testified that after the March 2016 incident, and this is crazy, she was at Cassie's house. Cassie walked in with the hood, a black eye, put her bag down, appeared to be extremely numb, and then about 30 minutes later, Carrie Morgan alleged that Diddy showed up outside the door banging on it with a hammer.
Rob Shooter is joining me, the PR publicist for Sean Combs, former PR guru for Sean Combs, and see everything went to crap when you left. Host of Naughty But Nice podcast and author of the 4-Word Answer. Rob Shooter, question to you. You're hearing about threats from another star, Don Richard, on the stand. Threats that people disappear when they talk. Did many people surrounding Sean Combs have to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and why?
Yes, absolutely. There are NDAs everywhere. I did not sign one, but lots and lots of people that worked for Puffy did sign NDAs. And this is because he doesn't want the truth getting out. Not necessarily about the accusations we are talking about today, but his whole life. He's a complete control freak. He decides what's in the media, what's in the press, and what isn't. You don't decide that. He does. An example, even though I didn't have an NDA with him, every press release I sent out about Puffy, whether it be playing Broadway, running a marathon, changing his name, he approved. He approved it. And a lot of celebrities sort of glance at these.
Why did he change his name so many times, Rob?
To get attention. To get attention. We'd literally be sitting in his conference room and he was like, not getting a lot of press this week. Let's change my name, which is why I have said, and I believe this in a really perverse way, Diddy is enjoying what is happening right now. He has made himself one of the most famous people in the world, and in a sick, perverse way, I think he's secretly enjoying that we're all talking.
Now, just like in R. Kelly's case, of course, they over sensationalize these NDAs. And it's very funny because everybody knows in the industry this is a common practice. And I feel like maybe that's something that a lot of Black artists picked up on other people doing that is now being criminalized when it comes to certain individuals. However, everybody knows that when it comes to criminal activities, non-disclosures are null and void. And that's pretty much how they played it when it came to R. Kelly, and how these women were able to be shuffled into specific individuals' office to get these settlements and then sign these non-disclosures, and the government come back and use that as this so-called history of abuse that's supposed to prove R. Kelly is so guilty. Nonetheless, just something to think about. He said that Diddy kept changing his names just to get attention. Well, it's also possible he was changing his names as a result of lawsuits that was going on behind the scenes. But again, when it comes to certain individuals, they will highlight certain lawsuits and try to criminalize other lawsuits to fit certain agendas. And that's my point of view. Anyways.
Talking about Diddy.
What about this PR fail? First of all, we hear all about Diddy's Tootsie Roll last week. How one victim, when she saw that, wasn't as afraid anymore. Then we have damning testimony on the stand, just pouring from Cassie Ventura, with the jury looking over at him like, UPOS. Ugh. Now we hear the latest PR fail, where Sean Combs' PR people are paying just bystanders out in front of the courthouse, paying them $20 an hour to wear a free Puffy t-shirt, and the press found out about it.
Pathetic, but not surprising. It seems to be here that Puffy is really waging a two-pronged war, a legal war and a PR war. PR is very important to Puffy. He has spent a lot of money on publicists, and these t-shirts, we shouldn't be that surprised. He's done this before. When I was working with him, he was trying to get young people to vote, and he came up with these t-shirts called Vote or Die that he sold, he made money from, at his store. So I'm wondering if these t-shirts were produced by Sean John, his clothing line. If not, then I do believe that this would ultimately get out. It's an old PR tool. It didn't work back then. It's not going to work today.
Now, hypothetically, Diddy is behind the people who they say are paying individuals to get out here with these free Diddy shirts as a PR stunt. It's funny that people like to selectively recognize PR stunts when it comes to certain aspects, but when it comes to others, people just glaze over that. Hypothetically speaking, he is behind people in this PR stunt. What is that going to do for him in the courthouse? If, hypothetically speaking, the jurors aren't supposed to be entertaining the things that are going on out here on the news, and on the blogs and all that, What are these PR stunts supposed to do when at the end of the day it's a whole lot of people getting paid to spin certain narratives on their platforms as well? So what's the difference? I'm just saying.
Yeah, they just tried to pay me $20 to wear a free puffy shirt.
Stop. I knew, I could tell because
The lady right there, she just kept convincing me to go wear a shirt, and I'm like, I'm good.
that's what. So just $20, and if you guys were, if you need $20, all you have to do is wear a free puff shirt.
Just stand out here.
And you said no.
Yeah, I said no.
Did they say how many hours?
$20 an hour.
How the mighty have sunk. That's from TikTok at Emily Knows Everything. Rob Shooter, a former PR guru, to Sean Combs. It's bad enough to pay people to wear free puffy t-shirts, but then to get busted on it.
Humiliating, stupid. This stuff gets out really, really quick in the press. But my sources are telling me it's actually worse than what we just saw. That Diddy's team has been trying to convince people to just show up. They want crowds outside this courthouse. Insiders are telling me that Diddy's really angry that people are not on the streets. His ego was so big, is so big, that he predicted hundreds, if not thousands of people would be outside that courthouse. Nobody is really there. There's about 100 or so.
Wait, let me see, Shooter. Oh no, Diddy's really angry this time. Ooh. So he's mad about his Tootsie Roll. Everybody finding out about that. He is mad about, what is he mad about? Throngs of people not coming to the courthouse. Did you say thousands? He expected thousands of people to show up outside the courthouse to support him.
You better believe it, Nancy. This guy has a huge ego. When I was with him, he wanted crowds everywhere, and if we had to pay for them to be there, so be it. He has a lot of money. And the Tootsie Roll thing.
How do you find people to come out and fawn over Sean Combs? How did you do that? Where did you find them?
You could find people that worked at record labels. You could find marketing companies. You could find people that would find you folks to turn up, and you pay them, and they wear t-shirts, they come to album signings. This actually might be very unusual in a legal case, but in the music business, when you see all those fans lined up outside record stores, quite a lot of them are actually paid to be there. It's called the hype business. It's called the business of illusions, and nobody does it better than Diddy until now.
Government can do no wrong. Obviously, we have.
Nobody can do it better than Diddy, huh? Well, what if it is my belief that a lot of the events that we see going on these public platforms are staged events? And you can't say that Diddy behind all that. So it's some people that can do it better. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go on to the next video, and then I'm going to get on up off of here. This one is Piers Morgan, and let's just see what they had to say.
Days on end, because what you're talking about now is an allegation that this, and I'm going to use its Mandingo stereotype of this crazed black man who's being prosecuted by 5 white women who are saying this man's sexual needs are insatiable.
The sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs is back underway in Manhattan today, with pop star Dawn Richard returning to the stand. The Danity Kane singer testified that when Diddy did not get his way, quotes, people could go missing, close quotes. She also told the court that she personally saw Diddy drag, kick and punch his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. Well, much of the evidence so far has been damning as prosecutors build their case that he was the kingpin in a criminal enterprise responsible for sex trafficking and racketeering.
Are we peeping game? See, what a lot of people aren't comprehending is it don't matter how inconsistent these witnesses are discovered to be during their testimonies. That ain't the point. That ain't what the prosecutors are trying to demonstrate, okay? They're just attempting to build this narrative about how he's coercing the specific people he was charged for trafficking to do the things that they were on video doing. Like I said last night, my biggest thing is, why do people ignore how she's saying that Diddy was threatening to blackmail her by leaking these images, when clearly there's other individuals doing just that. And when you have attorneys who've come out and say they're representing certain witnesses or victims in this case, and that they've been approached with these tapes, and their main role in situations like this is to try to sell these tapes to the so-called victim, somebody make this make sense. How can a lawyer come out here and set the stage and tell us that basically what she is a middleman behind people trying to extort a so-called victim on a freak-off tape, and they try to do that behind the scenes? So then they could go and approach certain celebrities and make a offer to make things go away and hope for a settlement. And the whole wide world will skip over how this looked janky as hell. But anyways.
But despite that, some people believe the drastic nature of the charges could mean that Diddy will sensationally walk free. In a moment, I'll talk to Matthew Fletcher, the former lawyer of Suge Knight, and Ben Chew, who successfully represented Johnny Depp. But we begin with a man who finds himself at the center of the Diddy scandal. Lawyer Tony Busby filed multiple lawsuits on behalf of alleged Diddy victims. There's recently been hit with an extortion suit by Jay-Z and accused of, quotes, targeting black men, close quotes. Well, he joins me now.
Now watch what he gonna say and tell me what I just previously said isn't a good summary from my perspective. And you can share my perspective. You can have your own perspective. But I just gave you what I thought. And now you can listen to this man tell you what the issue with him and Jay-Z became, and how he allegedly had these accusers come to him. He goes to Jay-Z to make an offer. Jay-Z says, bump that. I'm finna sue you because y'all are defaming me. And if what you're saying is true, y'all should be pursuing this criminally. And that's the same damn shit I said when it came to R. Kelly and why his lawyers failed him. But anyways, we gonna keep it moving.
Tony Busby, thank you very much for coming back to Uncensored. A lot has happened since you last appeared on this show. Let's start first of all with the fact that when we last spoke, you said you were representing 120 further alleged victims of Sean Diddy Combs in civil suits spanning 20 years with victims as young as 9, 14 and 15. Now, in March, you announced you were dropping 15 of these cases after Diddy's attorneys...
Hold on, pause right there. This man sitting here telling him he got 100 plus victims, right? According to the prosecutor's case, they only had 4 victims, in which 1 is missing in action. So my thing is this: if you wanted to really build this whole RICO of trafficking, why not get all of these victims? Why did we limit them to these 4? When in R. Kelly's case, even after the 5 they presented in New York, they still allowed uncharged acts come in and testify. So we'll see how this gonna play out.
Argued you weren't authorized to practice in the Southern District of New York. So just explain, before we go any further, explain what's happened there.
Yeah, typically when you're a licensed lawyer in New York and you're accepted in one of the federal districts, it's by reciprocity, you're accepted in the others. Well, they challenged that. And so they filed grievances against me and basically attacking my ability to practice in the Southern District of New York. And that is being sorted out. And while it's being sorted out, I withdrew from about 12 to 15 cases, but still represent those people. Those cases are still ongoing, still being represented by my firm and our local New York counsel. So I would call that a sideshow. Much ado about nothing, and we're working through it.
You've had a lot of time, obviously, since we last spoke to really, I guess, go over all the individual stories of the 120, as it was then, alleged victims. Have you now narrowed down that number to cases that you believe are incontrovertible? Are they all, in your estimation?
And before people try to be oblivious to how he just ended up with 120 some odd clients, unlike what he's going to come out and say, he from what I saw on social media, did something similar to what they did in R. Kelly's case when it came to soliciting victims. They put out this little memo, this little, I guess, press release telling whatever person that has been afflicted by Diddy to come forward. They did the same shit after they were so sickened watching the Surviving R. Kelly docuseries, right? But let him tell it. Oh, he's just a simple lawyer and he didn't go seek out these victims. They just came to him. This shit crazy.
Incontrovertible. What's the sort of credibility looking like with each of these cases now?
I'll tell you where we are now. We have 40 cases that are filed. We have 60 to 70 that will be filed in other jurisdictions. Remember, we were trying to make the limitations period that existed in the state of New York. So the rest of the cases that will be filed in other states, primarily in California. But the number's about still the same. Some people, because of these various sideshows and controversy, have dropped out, but still around 100 people who allege that Diddy assaulted them in some way. And as I've been receiving reports on this trial as it goes forward, one thing that has struck me is that the evidence and the factual circumstances are very consistent with what these plaintiffs have alleged. So we've been watching this criminal trial very closely, as you might imagine, and have watched this go forward. And it's striking to me, the allegations that are being made and some of the testimony that came out with Cassie and some of the testimony coming out today, very consistent with what these plaintiffs in the civil cases have been alleging.
And what is the sort of modus operandi consistent pattern that you're seeing?
What I'm seeing is there's obviously a lot of violence involved, a lot of threats involved. Some of these counts, specifically transportation to engage in prostitution, that keeps coming out over and over. But also the implicit and then actually explicit threats that are made towards individuals after this conduct ends. You won't say anything. You won't do anything about this. I mean, that has jumped out at me. I've also been watching the commentators. People have been seizing upon this word and that word and saying, oh, look here, that proves that there was no coercion because Cassie, allegedly voluntarily participated in this activity. And I think one of the things that hasn't come out and hasn't been discussed that I think needs to be discussed is this idea of trauma bonding. When someone is in a long-term relationship and they have been allegedly abused, people have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that why would they continue in the relationship? Why would they go back? And that's classic trauma bonding. There's other names for it. When people are kidnapped, you've heard about Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Heard about battered wife syndrome. What I have seen, we had somebody there during the opening statements, and of course we've been receiving real-time updates every day of the testimony, and that has jumped out at me time and time again, is that this idea of trauma bonding and these commentators who have seized upon certain snippets of text and so forth, where they talk about, well, look, Cassie was voluntarily participating in this. I don't see it that way, and I'm not sure the jury will see it that way either.
So y'all hear what he's saying? Like I told y'all, some of these people, they trying to sensationalize when she comes out and it's making it seem like that as we feel she was willingly participating. They're gonna have something to come back and psychoanalyze why she was doing this because of the fear factor. My thing is this: I don't think the vast majority of people with common sense are really asking why she go back in that aspect of not understanding trauma bonding, Stockholm syndrome, and why abused women stick to their abusers in a lot of cases, when a lot of us see that in our real lives. A lot of people came from those households when they saw people being abused and know why they stayed, because they weren't strong enough to leave. So the point remains, it don't matter why she stayed and why she didn't leave. From our perspective, what we're saying is she would be complicit to the crimes that the government is alleging he's guilty of. So guess what she can do? She can get on the stand and admit her role in it. She can be called out for participating in it, but she can also come right on back around and let these people psychoanalyze her and explain she did it on the behalf of Diddy. Rico.
The other thing that's happened with you personally since we spoke is that in February, you withdrew a lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs and Jay-Z, which alleged the rape of a 13-year-old girl in 2000. The anonymous plaintiff.
Hold up. Ain't no minors in Diddy's case. Ain't no minors in Diddy's case. Ain't that what they said? Why? Why would they be so gun-ho to say that when even if they didn't see that in specific documents, they've heard these allegations floating everywhere. They've seen the circus acts with all of these people from these people that claim to be ex-bodyguards coming out talking about they super saber niggas now. You know, you got all of this weird ass activity going on with people coming to these platforms trying to clear their names. Because you got the government saying that all these people were allegedly complicit to trafficking, allegedly. How do I know? How do we, the people, know that some of these artists are being used as a scapegoat for the real trafficking going on in the industry? When I said this shit is bigger than R. Kelly, it's bigger than Diddy too. But while everybody is so fascinated with the salacious details of what's going on with each of these stories, everybody keep forgetting about these high-profile people that were implicated in Epstein's case that would give light to all of these political agendas. When you heard people coming out saying that specific individuals were railroaded and that certain things were being funded by specific individuals, it should make sense why there's skepticism within a lot of people who can look at the bigger picture of what's going on. Because regardless of whether the character that is on display is guilty of the allegations, there's something bigger going on behind the scenes that a lot of people won't acknowledge. But that's neither here nor there.
Referred to as a Jane Doe, voluntarily withdrew the case, the court records show. Now, in that lawsuit, she'd initially alleged that she'd been offered a ride to a party at a private residence by a limo driver for Combs following the MTV Video Music Awards in 2000. Now, as a result of those claims, Jay-Z came out fighting. He filed a lawsuit against you personally. He said that you and the Jane Doe, the accuser, were soullessly motivated by greed in abject disregard of the truth and the most fundamental precepts of human decency. The filing claimed the woman voluntarily admitted to Jay-Z's representative that he did not assault her, and that you, Tony Busby, had pushed her to go forward with a false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter, Jay-Z, in order to leverage a maximum payday. And he went on to say this further about you. Busby directed his employees to edit Wikipedia pages to enhance Busby's image and damage Mr. Carter's and Rock Nation's reputations. What is your response?
So pause right there. Y'all remember the stories that came out in which people were running with this narrative that Jay-Z sent this janky ass private investigator to this witness and allegedly intimidated her, and that's how they got this recording of her admitting that Jay-Z had nothing to do with what happened to her, right? Well, that's pretty much what he was getting at when he said that, and why Busby is still going to be adamant in his position that even though this is what he's claiming, it still don't change that he had the right by law to take his client's complaint and reach out to Jay-Z and try to come up with a solution, instead of Jay-Z seeing that countersuing him, then allegedly sending people to spy on the alleged victim. See what I'm saying? Now, Jay-Z had just filed his lawsuit and left it at that, and there's no people out here saying that he then sent a janky-ass private investigator to harass the victim. Then it wouldn't look so janky. Kind of like I said with R. Kelly's case and all of these janky ass people who came out here to do so much work and ain't do shit, but now here still trying to give their observations about everybody else's opinion because they still salty.
Response to all this.
You said a great mouthful. That's almost every line you stated is false, and all that will be sorted out. And it's all in litigation, as you probably know. I mean, this whole situation with Jay-Z started with him suing me as a John Doe in California, simply because we sent him a letter stating that these are the allegations. We want to sit down.
See how he glazed over that? The whole thing just started when Jay-Z sued me as a John Doe. That ain't how it started. The whole thing started when your ass got this complaint from a so-called victim. Then you, instead of y'all going to the police and pressing charges, you wanted to take this complaint to Jay-Z and try to get restitution. And you gonna sit here and play these games like that wasn't a demand for no money. What the fuck else what else compromise would you be looking for? Make it make sense.
Down and have a talk. And the reaction was thermonuclear. I mean, it was suing me, ultimately suing her, suing my local council in New York, and on and on. And all of that will be sorted out in the courts. And I feel confident about all of that. But again, that's a sideshow to what's going on here. What's really going on is we have 20 years of conduct. You know, when we first came out and said, you know, there's this many people who have called, there's this many people who alleged to be victimized by Sean Diddy Combs, people, you know, raised their eyebrows and said, how is that possible? How could there possibly be that many alleged victims? Well, now I think what we've seen over the last week or so of testimony is that this conduct that's been alleged was happening almost on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis. And so it's not surprising or shocking at all that there would be people who would claim to be victimized by this sort of conduct based on.
I'm gonna stop again because I don't think the general public is in consensus of disbelief that this could happen. No, I don't think that's what it is. I think what it is that if these people are saying all this fucked up shit was happening, like even Dawn, and she's saying how disrespected she was in making the band, which a lot of us saw the disrespect that he was giving a lot of people. Like he had me with the whole cheesecake shit. I would have been like, fuck that. I'm finna walk my ass home. If I'm walking anywhere, bitch, I'm walking home. And that's all I be saying when it comes to free will. If you choose to let somebody disrespect you, if you choose to be around people who you say are violent, belligerent, abusive, and all this and that, and then you don't say shit, you don't do shit, you don't file no police reports, you don't try to get this justice at the time, and then 15, 20, 30 years down the line, now all of a sudden you want to help the government build up this history of abuse that don't make no damn sense and make you look as complicit as the accusations you're waging against the person you're accusing. Make this shit make sense.
On the frequency of it.
But do you accept, though, that in Jay-Z's case, the allegations against him from that particular accuser were false?
I think you should talk to or hear what the alleged victim says. And I think I will, you know, I'm a lawyer. Let's be clear. You know, people come to me. I don't go out and look for clients. I don't need to look for clients.
So why did you put out the little ad that I saw clear as day on the damn social media platforms, specifically Facebook in general, calling out to anybody who's been abused by Diddy? If you don't go out looking for victims, you might not go out physically looking for victims, but just like in R. Kelly case, Susan Loggins, who had individuals just bringing them so-called R. Kelly victims took out this big ass billboard back in the day, and people just act oblivious to why people would just keep coming trying to milk the cash cow.
And people come to me and they tell me the situation. I have people vet it, have other people vet it. We file a case, and the whole purpose of the court system is to sort those things out and to determine whether the individual, what they say is true, just like what is going on in this criminal case. So I'm confident that the courts will sort that out. And rather than attempting to try the case in the public like has been done, I'll be confident to try it in the courts.
So just to be clear,
if that is the case, you see what I'm finna say? If that were the case, and he's so confident after he do his investigation on the accusers that come to him, why do you have to reach out to the accuser for a solution when you could just take your motherfucking ass to the court and let them bring your ass a solution instead of it appearing to be just what it appears to be, a shakedown?
Clear on that. Are you saying that that case is still active, that those claims against Jay-Z remain active?
I'm saying that the alleged victim has never recanted and continues to say the same thing she said from the day that she called the lawyer that called me. Let's remember, she contacted a different lawyer who vetted her and then sent her to me, and then my office vetted her. So this is not a situation that's been portrayed that we went out and found somebody so we could sue Jay-Z. That's so far from the truth that it's almost laughable. But as just as late as the latest court filing from Jay-Z, he acknowledges that this alleged victim continues to say the same thing she said from the beginning.
If you're struggling with sleepless nights and exhausting days, you might want to try Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who value hard work. I guess it's going to come down to what a jury thinks of how much of this was consensual or how much was non-consensual or indeed stroke coercive. And a lot of may rest, of course, on Cassie Ventura's testimony. How do you think she did? Obviously, she's heavily pregnant, which must have made it a very difficult experience for her. But how much of her testimony do you think, if you're a juror listening to all this, what are the sort of very persuasive parts of what she said, and what are the parts that may give you pause for thought?
Well, one of the things I want to point out is none of us, maybe your commentators were, but I certainly wasn't in the courtroom to hear what she had to say. This is a situation in the federal court where they do not allow cameras, so we can't see her testimony and see her body language and hear her tone of voice and that sort of thing. So what we have is commentators who seize on certain things she said, certain things she fails to say, and then try to make a mountain out of it. Let's remember that in a lawsuit, you don't win a case based on one witness or one piece of evidence. Typically, you're building a wall, and one of the things they teach you in law school is a brick is not a wall. Cassie Ventura's testimony is one brick in what I expect to be a very long trial with a lot of bricks attempting to build a wall. People have seized on some of the comments and texts that she sent where she seemed to be voluntarily participating in some of these so-called freak-offs. I would suggest, if I were the prosecutor, that this is classic trauma bonding, that she is trying to please the individual with whom she's in a relationship. And I would not place a lot of stock in the fact that was not coerced simply because she was acting like she wanted to do it. Now, I didn't sit there and hear the testimony. So that's going to have to be decided by 12 people. And, I made a living over 30 years. I win a lot of cases because I put a lot of faith in the jury. And I try to put the bad evidence and the good evidence and explain why the bad evidence doesn't keep me from winning the case. And I think that's, I know you're going to have commentators who have different points of view, but I think the prosecution is doing the job that it does. And let's remember, we're talking about the federal government. Typically, the federal government does not bring a case unless it has a lock solid case. And I'm assuming that the prosecutors knew the weak points of Cassie's testimony and understood that there would be cross points, and understood that this was going to be watched and poured over with a fine-tooth comb, like I'm sure your commentators will do. But if I'm the prosecutors right now, I'm thinking, okay, the opening statement laid it out. We have our first witness, our first key witness, who really just demonstrated that there was a lot of violence, a lot of threats. and really explain the nature and shocking nature of some of these so-called freak-offs. And then when you think about the actual claims involved, sex trafficking, obviously that requires coercion or fraud or some sort of force involved. But there's also transportation to engage in prostitution.
It'd be funny when you be hearing people speak on certain things, because if you know what I know, it don't take no coercion or none of that to. Okay, that's equivalent to the pimp and hoe scenario. Now, of course, you got some gorilla pimps that's gonna slap the shit out they hoe, but then you got some of them Casanova pimps. You got different variations of the pimps who can get in the minds of these women and have them do what they want, right? Okay, that's one thing. And you can call that manipulation, which it is a degree of manipulation. But at the same time, if you let somebody get in your head and manipulate you and you go commit a crime, are you not still guilty of that crime? Oh, okay.
That would simply be transporting someone across state lines and paying them.
As far as Aubrey, she not testifying. They already brought that out. She been on this internet capping just like some of these people that were doing in the R. Kelly fake ass sector, talking about who was testifying and who wasn't testifying. She now comes out talking about she wasn't subpoenaed to testify. So no, I don't think she's going to be testifying at all.
For sex, that's the Old Man Act that I'm sure you've heard of. I think the prosecution is starting to build the wall, and I expect there will be.
You know why they building the wall? Because of what he just said. People are oblivious to what the Mann Act is, and it's basically the solicitation. And Cassie saying that she was booking these escorts to come and participate in these freak offs, which is prostitution. So they're providing the transportation or the funds of the transportation and or the rooms and all of this. So that goes in line with the act in itself that he's being charged with. So obviously what I just clearly said was that Cassie would be just as guilty as Diddy, but she gets the free get out of jail, I'm a victim card. And that's cool for some, but I'm just saying that trauma bond and shit can only go so far. Like I said in my last slide, when you go into court, they're going to tell you something like ignorance of the law does not excuse your guilt when you commit a crime. They don't care nothing about the excuses you're going to make, whether you were on drugs. Ain't none of that relevant. They done sent specially challenged people to jail, knowing they ain't got their right mind. Like, none of that is relevant.
Be a prosecution.
And do you ultimately believe that he is going down for a long time?
I don't want to, I've been very careful. We as you might expect, were contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office early on in this. They wanted to talk to some of our alleged victims. We made them available to the extent they wanted to. Some did, most did not, which is not surprising. But so I don't want to jinx it or say yes or no. I mean, I'm confident to whether.
That ain't a red flag to you, even though you claim you vetted these stories and these people don't want to really get their justice if they had that option. They just want to work with you to try to get a bag. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
He is acquitted or he is convicted. It's been done in a professional manner, and I'll be, happy that the court system worked the way it's supposed to.
Okay, Tony Busby, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you joining our Censored again. Well, I'm now joined by Ben Chube, a lawyer who served as a co-lead counsel for Johnny Depp.
Yeah, they play too much, because from what I'm seeing so far, contrary to popular belief, we're going to see a repeat of what we've seen laid out. Because if his defense ain't going to come with nothing better than he was under the influence or all of these episodes that he had, or a result of him coming down or, going through withdrawal or whatever the case may be, that ain't going to excuse the fact that he's still going to be essentially guilty of engaging in prostitution and being the fall guy for everybody saying that they engaged in it, but they did it because they were scared of Diddy. You get it?
Amber Heard case, and the former defense attorney who represented Suge Knight, Matthew Fletcher. And interestingly, gentlemen, I think you both completely disagree here. Matthew, let me start with you. You think this is a case of Diddy being railroaded and that the case is almost borderline farcical. Why do you say that?
Well, good morning. I can tell you why it's farcical to me is this idea of this mythical creature that can take ketamine and MDA and booze and then have sex for dozens of days on end and hours. That from a pharmacological standpoint, that's not possible. This idea that Cassie waits 10, 12 years to file a lawsuit and writes a book and then doesn't turn it over.
I could tell he ain't been around no drug addicts before. Because I ain't going to say it's not possible, because it could be possible, because I done been around some strange-ass people that could be going and going like the Energizer Bunny once they do their little specific drug of choice. So I don't know. It could be very well possible if they just doing drugs on top of drugs, but that's neither here nor there.
To a general publishing group, but sends it to Jay-Z's lawyer and says, by the way, we're going to put this out unless you pay us millions of dollars, bespeaks the real motives behind this. And let me just say this. Puff is not a good person. He's a bad woman beater and he's a coward. I know the guy. Everybody I know agrees with that. But this is not a case about domestic violence. And you can talk about trauma bonding and any other psychological terms you want to lay on there. But the idea that Cassie had her own apartment, had her own money, had her own extra boyfriends or anything else does not speak to me as a traditional victim that we would see in a case of spousal abuse where this is ongoing. And I'll tell you this, when the prosecution told everyone that P. Diddy urinated in her mouth, that was shocking. When Daniel Phillip comes on and says, no, actually the person who urinated told me to urinate in her mouth was Cassie. And not only did she tell me that, she gave a tutorial and said, you want to do it slowly to make it last longer.
Ain't that what I said last night? How you going to be sitting here guiding this man on how to piss in your mouth, but you on the damn stand talking about, of course I didn't want nobody to piss in my mouth. Of course, it was obvious that I didn't want anybody to pee on me. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?
At that point in time, the old adage is you can't win a trial with the first witness, but you can sure lose a trial. That lost me. Because what you're talking about now is an allegation that this, and I'm going to use its Mandingo stereotype of this crazed black man who's being prosecuted by 5 white women who are saying this man's sexual needs are insatiable and they can have sex for hours and hours and never rest and always ejaculate. That's not true from a pharmacological standpoint. That is absurd. If this was in the 60s or 70s in Mississippi, I think people would be irate. I don't like Sean Combs. That video speaks for itself. The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for that? The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for all of these crimes that have allegedly occurred, but we save it all up and we bring it in this case? And to Mr. Busby's point, this idea that the federal government does no wrong in prosecuting people, you know, it's kind of ironic that a Comey is on this case and a Comey also, you know, and he doesn't need my advice, but they told us that President Trump was a spy for Russia too. And that was complete BS. And we know that was. And so this idea and concept that the government does no wrong, federal government does no wrong in bringing cases, I don't think it's true. This is not a strong case. This is a case that if they prosecute it or defend it correctly, and you point out the idea that Cassie says Combs raped her and then she went back to his house sometime later and were having sex, and then her husband FaceTimed her. And she can't remember if she was actually had that man's genitals in her while she was FaceTiming her husband. That's not believable. It's not believable to me. No one would believe that. And it's just part of a long line of, as Busby says, these are bricks. A brick is not a wall, but a brick hits you in the head. A brick still hits you in the head. And like when Cassie says, Combs and his bodyguard went to shoot and kill Suge Knight. That's absurd. Combs is terrified of Suge Knight, terrified, has been terrified of him for decades, going back to a shooting that happened in Atlanta. Combs is not a tough guy. He's not going to jump in a car and go kill Suge Knight in Los Angeles. That's almost laughable. But there's multiple aspects of this case that when you look at factually and practically, it really brings to question, why are we here prosecuting, what was the old adage, sex, drugs, and rock and roll? I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not silly enough to think that there aren't many people who've engaged in sex with rock and roll stars or movie stars and use sex and use drugs. Those are never prosecuted.
Okay.
And Cassie says, I paid.
Yeah, no, just
see what I'm saying? He made a very valid point, but a lot of people won't acknowledge that. When I heard it said that the whole Suge Knight story, I had to side out there. Because, yeah, I could believe a story of Diddy going and slapping the shit out of Drake. But I'm just not going to believe a story of him pulling out the strap and getting ready to ride down on Suge Knight. I'm just not going to believe that story. I'm not. I just don't perceive Diddy as being that type of gangster. But when you're trying to build these bricks of a false, sensationalized story, yeah, why not throw in there that he done pulled out some guns and was getting ready to go ride out on people, considering what they've already previously said, that when people speak out or when things don't go Diddy's way, they disappear type shit.
I just wanted to bring in Ben, who's been listening to all that, because it was fascinating. I got to say, the way you talked through all that. Ben, you don't agree. You think Diddy's going down. Why are you certain of that?
Well, I think my colleague makes some excellent points, and obviously this is going to be a very long trial, so there's much to still unfold. I think the purpose of opening with Cassie, of course, is the video, and the video certainly prepares the jury to conclude that he is capable of committing the crimes for which he's ultimately charged. The problem I had with the cross-examination of Cassie Ventura is this isn't a he said, she said case. There are going to be 3 other women and maybe even another male alleged victim who are going to tell a similar story. One of the second witness has already corroborated another alleged beating of Cassie Ventura. So that's the problem. And I think the government will have, it's not that the government can do no wrong. Obviously, we have seen it do wrong in some cases. But I think the point is that the government would not have brought this indictment if it did not have evidence.
Right. I mean, the track.
You gotta be clear when you say stuff like that. Because there's certain black folks that'll hear that and be like, see, the government ain't gonna bring charges if they don't have this. The government ain't gonna do this if they ain't got that. You a damn lie. All the government need is a mouthpiece to say that they have the probable cause for this and that, to get the paperwork for what they trying to present. Y'all better stop playing and wake the fuck up. At the end of the day, circumstantial evidence can be used for these people to try to play these games, to act like they got so much overwhelming evidence to prove their case, when actuality they don't. The only thing they present is stuff to make you ask more questions.
Record of the federal government in cases like this is almost, it's inevitable that he goes down. It's like 99% hit rate, right? But they do occasionally get it wrong. But most of the time, if the feds bring a case like this, they win. I mean, isn't that the likelihood here, just on stats alone?
100%. I mean, their prosecution conviction rate of the federal government is in 99 percentiles, greater than the odds of being convicted if you're in Russia. Doesn't change the facts that in each case that sometimes you get defense attorneys who know what they're doing and know how to fight it and understand it and take them on. And in this case, what the prosecution is doing is saying that's a bad, mean, violent guy. Look at all of the bad things he does. And they're playing to the stereotype, and they're doing it covertly, but it's fairly obvious to those of us of a certain persuasion that you're arguing that this is a sex-crazed black man who has to get his craven desires administered to on a daily basis. So they set up an entire record company for the purposes of being able to entice Cassie Ventura into having sex. That's baloney. But
what he said, that's equivalent to how some people want to believe that a lot of the things that Diddy was engaging in was black magic and sex rituals. So, hey, don't glaze over the endless possibilities just because the prosecutor's job is to present this one narrative. It's the prosecutor's job to make him appear to look like this and like that. But as this man just said, people will sugarcoat why the feds have such a high conviction rate. And it ain't always because they have such a solid case. It could also be because people have an ineffective counsel or don't have the proper means to defend themselves in the court of law. So when you hear Diddy done drop 10 million plus on his defense, but you hear people over here every time you fucking turn around in R. Kelly's fake ass sector got a fundraise and bullshit, it should be clear the differences between the two. So again, that's why we're gonna keep our eye on how it actually plays out. Because if Diddy's defense team does what they're supposed to do, he could have the chance of walking free, as these people have put out there. But at the same time, if there's a bigger agenda at play, we'll see what happens.
That's what they're doing. And they can bring on multiple people they've had sex with. And all they're proving is, you know what, there's a secret. There's sex workers in the world, and there's people who frequent sex workers, but that doesn't really go to the issue. This is a RICO prosecution that was ideally brought to take down the mafia. Sean Diddy Combs is a guy who's a woman beater, and they should have prosecuted him for it. And there's no question about it. But you're telling me with a straight face, this is a human slave trap, white slave act case? There's no one who was brought here against their will. Cassie had every choice she wanted to make. They talk about Kid Cudi. Go be with him. Talk about Michael B. Jordan. You know, the reality is this was an incredibly attractive woman, and she was in great demand and had many opportunities to have people. She chose that lifestyle, and I'm not in any way.
Well, as we're talking, actually, Matthew, I want to bring Ben back here because Dawn Richard, for the Danity Kane singer, has been on the stand today and recorded an incident in 2009 where she witnessed Diddy hit Ventura with a skillet and then allegedly threatened both Richard and Ventura. Richard testified, he said you could go missing, that we could die. I was shocked but also scared. She said she saw Combs carrying a handgun. She said Combs' bodyguards had guns too, keeping them on their lower back. I mean, to Matthew's point, Ben, I mean, he's obviously a very bad guy. He's obviously a woman beater. We've seen that with the video. He likes guns. He likes to threaten people, all of these things. But in terms of what the feds have actually gone after him for, racketeering, sex trafficking, and so on.
They said he likes guns. We didn't know he likes guns up until the feds rolled up and confiscated some guns, because according to the conspiracies we saw all over the internet is Diddy had his girls carrying the strap. Wasn't that what they were saying about J-Lo? She was the one carrying the strap. Ain't that what Jaguar Wrong was saying? The fuck?
Matthew makes a good point. This was set up for the mafia. This was the kind of stuff that when Rudy Giuliani tried to go after the mob, this is how they did it. And some people do think that they've just overreached in what they're going for him for on this. And for that reason alone, a jury might be persuaded to acquit.
See, that's exactly what I said about R. Kelly. But people didn't want to hear it then, because what I essentially came to the conclusion of was, regardless of how you feel about the allegations and whether you believe he's guilty or innocent, the government should have charged him in accordance to the specific crimes that they wanted to make him guilty of, instead of structuring this stupid ass, fake ass RICO and allowing the unindicted co-conspirators to fade to the background while R. Kelly is being held accountable as the ringleader. If you're going to tell me this is about justice, you should be holding everybody accountable. But the fact of the matter is, we all know why they structured these cases as a RICO, so that they could format these allegations in a way that avoids the statute of limitations that goes with some of these charges that they knew they couldn't get away with. Duh. That's why I say abuse of RICO that came with R. Kelly, that's going on with Diddy. If people feel like he did all this and did all that, they shouldn't have had to structure this case in the form of a RICO, but not hold accountable the enterprise. It don't make no sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Matthew and you both make excellent points, and that may be what ultimately happens. But we're at the beginning of a very long trial. And one of the things, as Matthew knows, is if you're a prosecution or if you're just putting on any kind of case, you want to keep the jury interested. So there'll be sensational testimony, as we've begun with sensational testimony that prepares the jury for the idea that maybe this isn't a good guy. And there's going to be some technical testimony going through the elements of the crimes for which he is charged. Now, if that's not there, if they don't have the receipts, there could be an acquittal and there could be an overreaching. But I think the prosecution is still very early on in its case.
So you heard it. They're going to have sensational testimony, and then they're going to have technical testimony. And when you hear the technical testimony, you would automatically assume it should be this abundance of evidence to prove this man is guilty to go with the witness testimony, right? Well, no, that don't necessarily mean that. That means that they could then come in and bring in some specialists and experts to excuse why these people were willingly breaking the law because they were so scared of Gangsta Puffy.
So I think we have to wait and see.
And Ben, do you see
There's
any
something very interesting.
Sorry, just one sec, Matthew. I'll go back to you. But Ben, just to bring in, when you were on the Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard case, do you see any parallels here? In particular, perhaps how a jury might be moved by what they hear?
Well, I think these are very different cases. That was Mr. Depp's case, civil case for defamation. So I don't see the parallel so much here.
But in terms of how a jury can be not manipulated, but perhaps led down certain thought processes, do you think? I mean, star power cannot be ignored, I think, in these cases.
No, I think that's right, and that's why I think you have to, if in other words, if you're representing Diddy, you're going to have to counter that, and you're going to have to. I think he's going to have to testify as a practical matter. Criminal defendants usually don't, but I think with the video and the other testimony, I think he's going to have to come out and counter the narrative and be penitent for that, even if that's not what he's being tried for. I think he needs to put that before the jury.
Yeah, and Matthew, finally, to you on that point, would you, if you were advising Diddy, would you tell him to testify?
Diddy's horrible in cross-examination. When he was working with Johnny Cochran, back in his original case of shooting, he comes off horrendously. And one quick point I want to make, if I may, this issue of consent and coercion, and the judge made a very big ruling last week when he agreed that they are going to show the videos or some of the videos. And I've been told that Cassie is either a tremendous actress or she's actually having climaxes or orgasms. It's the when Harry met Sally argument. If that woman literally is on video having sex freely, and if what I've been told is true, that makes a real big issue as to whether or not this was coerced. It's a bad situation in retrospect, and she may be a wonderful witness today. And similar to Amber Heard, from what I've been told, she turns to the jury and speaks to them, which jurors hate. And prosecutors and lawyers always make the mistake of, now turn to the jury and talk to them. It's not natural. And so I see the similarities in that context. But this whole idea and concept that we're going to go back and Monday morning quarterback a person's sex scenes is open, certainly leaves open the question that she enjoyed certain portions of it. And then that really goes to the heart of the case. If part was consensual, they have to go down on it. But my understanding, there's no way, to answer the point, that Diddy's testifying. And the more they play that video, it kind of works in the favor of the defense because the jurors get desensitized to it. It's horrendous. It's bad. In Suge Knight's case, we played the video over and over of the young man being ran over by the car, because after a while, it's just making sausage. It's shocking when you first see it, but when you work there, it's not that bad. But, you know, unless something changes drastically, my understanding is, and Diddy would come off horribly, in my opinion.
Fascinating. I've got to leave it there. Matthew, Ben, both, thank you very much indeed. We've got a long way to run with this, so I hope to get you both back on again. Thank you very much.
They is funny as heck. So that would go along with the last statement he made about he is now curious about Cassie's acting skills and some of these quote unquote freak off images and videos, because if she was able to act a certain way in these videos, it would kind of put a damper on that narrative that she was being coerced, considering it's certain things you might not be able to fake, is what he hinted around to from my perspective. And that would make sense to why some of these reporters have now put out the narrative that they are requesting to see some of these freak off videos. Ain't that something? Well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Considering, hey, you don't want to violate this victim's rights by exposing these type of videos, but the press feel like they should have access to this type of information, considering it's being exposed in this trial. And that's very funny, because a lot of us who followed the R. Kelly case said that very thing about a lot of information that clearly the public wasn't able to see for themselves. So I get that people want to go down to the courthouse and see things for themselves, but my major emphasis and what I wanted to present is the fact that you can do that. You can watch people who go out and do their reporting, but you also have to keep an open mind to the fact that some people will mislead you with the information, even if they go down there and see it themselves. Because as we see with both Diddy and R. Kelly's federal case, they don't televise these cases. So you have to rely on what people say and or go get the paperwork and transcripts and read it yourself. So that's why I refuse in the fake ass R. Kelly sector to be going back and forth with people who read the same shit that I read, who had the opportunity to present their perspective the way they wanted to, but got me fucked up and thinking I'm going to keep coming out here explaining why I said this, why I feel like this, why I have the right to stand on this principle, when at the end of the day, like I said, if I feel like the government didn't prove shit and the man's legal defense team was tainted or corrupt, just like the damn judicial system, I have the right to feel that way. I ain't got to explain that. But what are y'all thoughts about this so far? the way they're leading up to the next set of witnesses, because people act like it's over with just Cassie because they fail to realize that they had to go on and get her out the way. And even now, you hear talks about Diddy's team wanting to get her back, even if she has this child, to come back and continue testifying. And prosecutors are trying to fight this. Well, from anybody else's perspective, why would that be such a problem if they have things so airtight? If this man is fighting against a life sentence and he has more pertinent questions just because they feel like time was wasted when she was available to testify, and at a later time they have more questions, they should be able to answer or have those questions answered. From my perspective, why would it be a problem, considering some of us feel like prosecutors wasted a whole lot of time building up this DV storyline? At the end of the day, like I said, we see the similarities between the reporting against this Diddy case, and we see the same episodes that we saw going down with R. Kelly. How you feel about their guilt and innocence is your prerogative, but at the end of the day, we see the blueprint that the prosecutors from R. Kelly's case told us they would be following. So it's not a surprise that we could see how they're going to shape this RICO, while people who report on this and commentate on the topic will keep trying to act oblivious to where this is going. With all that being said, I'm going to get off here on that note. We'll see when I pop back up again. It might be another late night live. Who knows? But we'll see. Y'all have a good night.